to think about how to involve these like narrow specialists to the medical checkups. So usually they just fly to these areas, and this is very expensive. And in order to cover the Arctic regions, I think that the Institute of Medicine is planning to increase the number of places, residency places for general practice physicians, because these general practice physicians, they um, can provide medical aid in many areas. So I think I fit in my time limit, and of course the training of medical staff, though we have various special programs, uh, for example, like rural doctor and so on. But every year we see less and less people wanting to go there, because doctors are also human beings, and uh, they want to go to settlements with good infrastructure. And so if so there was some uh, technical problems with the connection. Yes, attracting young is when they enter university. Without teachers, the training in the subjects and those who have like target places, for example, to the Arctic. So we are moving to Magadan and
Dear, I'm very glad to present you my report. So, the Siberia and the Republic of
so when we are talking about the natural impact on
when it's not every family can afford the average Russian Federation in red, and then we have
Murmansk Oblast in blue and Magadan Oblast in green. So we see that in the Arctic, children suffer more from respiratory diseases. For example, if you compare compared even to the Russian average, but if you compare with southern areas like Sochi area, maybe the mobility will be so Magadan has this quite sad
very harsh summer and with temperatures over 30 degrees. So this research led us to understand how the adaptation works. We saw that there is a dynamic in physical development. There are the process of acceleration, while in the world it's the opposite. So there is early prediabetes, very great changes in the lungs, that led us to form a coefficient of intensity. It shows these coefficients in 3 cities. Hypertension of 24%, and you can see the change in diameter of venous sector, especially in another. So the oxygen is delivered to the lungs, and metabolism is increasing in Magadan and Susuman, and also hyperglycemia, mostly in Susuman and in Chukot Autonomous Region. We also made a microelements analysis, and there are problems in all 3 regions, especially for your calcium, especially in Magadan, and iodine. Magadan and another are in the seaside, but still they have iodine problems. If you look through all the systems, and in comparison to the center of Russia, another Susuman and Magadan have a lot of problems and stress and physiological systems of people. This is the value of adaptation. Also, we have divided people for generations. Zero generation are migrants, newcomers, Caucasians who migrated but were not born there. The first generation, their children, and then third, their grandchildren. Microcirculation, you can see it here. And in comparison with the third generation, there is a decrease in the diameter of capillary bed. In general, microcirculation changes is not so big. So this is infrared thermovisor images. You can see that the optimization is happening. It increases from 0.7 to 0.9. This is the table of external breathing of migrants and second generation. There are some positive factors, and in general, you can see that the decrease of the stress from zero to third population is happening, and there is some dynamic in microcirculation. So we formed this coefficient value of adaptation, and Central Russia is considered to be norm. In another, it increased to 2.9, and in Susuman and Magadan, it's even higher, almost 7 times. This is the value for adaptation that can lead to decrease in adaptation reserves. In more comfort zones, it's lower, and in continental climate, it's faster. The index of glycemia is decreasing, and metabolism stabilizes. Migrants in Susuman Thank you for your attention. This is the end of my speech. Thank you very much, Sergei Igorovich. I have a question. You were talking about migrants and first and second generation. Did you compare these indicators with the indigenous peoples that were living in these extreme conditions for years? Yes, we made such comparisons in external breathing, particularly, and indigenous people, there is increase in lung capacity. traditional nutrition is getting less and less popular for indigenous people, and they have more European-like nutrition. And so they have an increase of sugar in blood. So this that may lead to diabetes in the future, unfortunately. Thank you very much for your information. So now we are giving the floor to Moscow, Sergei Vasilyevich Mishirakov. Good morning. Sergei Mishirakov is General Director of Non-Commercial Partnership Corporate Educational and Scientific Center. This is a non-commercial educational and scientific center. Last year, President was talking about the need in such organizations. We started our company in 2003 to understand our activities. I will tell you 12,000 people were trained in our center. Second, in science, last year we gained new material, graphene, that is has very unique characteristics. It might be interesting for Arctic people. So adding this material to improves it very much. Also, today we will talk about management of anthropogenic risks. So why do we talk about these risks exactly? Because risk-oriented approach in management is a methodology, methods, and mechanisms that considers the level of risks we have worked in this direction in 90s of the last century. Our researchers were conducting experiments and participated in expeditions to the Arctic and Antarctic, and that was harsh. And our goal was to do research in adaptation. We have monographies. So I would like to make a suggestion to Sergei. We can give you materials in this area. So our research members work
So I was responsible for designing this concept. So the project was called the Wave Breaker. And so we have some experience here. They are practical. And I can say that our today's activities are aimed at providing reliability to the natural sector, to the real sector of economy. And so our risk-oriented approach is very practical. So when we are talking about anthropogenic risks, we define it as the risks caused by malfunction or dysfunction of the personnel and the facilities. For example, we are talking about power engineering facilities. And of course, we are related to the science of risks, and we understand that the risks are available at certain business facilities and on the territories as well. So that's why we use this developed methods. The methods of hierarchical comparisons, and which assume both statistical data. For example, we can estimate some weather forecasts, weather statistics, weather history, and we can evaluate certain indexes, and then we use them for calculating the probabilities. And so this information, we have these four contour models. So when we are talking about anthropogenic risks, we single out the index of the professional readiness of the staff. Why? There are many unaccounted factors which affect power companies and other companies. And the underlying thesis made by Masaki Imai, the quality of production starts from the quality of the staff. And so this is our underlying principle as well. So how we can adapt our personnel. And so we understand that human resources are not limited. So we need to introduce this human resources management into our production. So now we consider managing your personnel as one of the production processes. Also, there are certain notions like severe demographic processes, depopulation, degradation of human resources, the lack of the drawbacks of the existing medical care, and so on. And we do realize that in the real economy, the impact of human beings on technical process and on the entire production is not well studied, and now we understand. So now we have more like the automation of the processes and digitalization. So we have developed this index of personal success, index of production efficiency, and the index of professional adaptation as well. So we have the index of psychological adaptation as well. So they are defined, they are calculated by special software. So I'm not going to talk about in detail about these formulas, but they prove, they correlate with the data we gather. So I would like to talk in more detail about the index of professional adaptation. It breaks into the index of physical capability and psychological capability. So we have this system and a model to determine these parameters. So there are 3 levels. So the first level is the level of psychological capability, then the physical level. So there is a certain remote monitoring system developed to look at the to estimate the physical state. For example, it is based on hypertension, so we have certain software to control that. And the third level is psychophysiological adaptation. And since we live in the digital age, we have worked out business processes, and they are digitalized, and this helps us to estimate the economic effect on investing into your personnel. So via business processes, we go to the general estimation of the production efficiency. So we worked in several cities of Russia, and after we did our research there, we did our studies there, but they continue their work with us, which proves the efficiency of our models. So the personnel is actually interested in continuous monitoring of their physical capability. And this situation and this procedure helps us to spot any deviations in the health condition. And we hope that our model is innovative, it's digital, it's very effective. For example, it can estimate physical capability in 3 minutes. And so we can have like pre-shift monitoring. So very fast it can estimate the health condition. So it is dynamic, and it also it is already used in real production. So all of the hardware and software were developed here in Russia. And so, for example, this clip which reads the heart rate, and it is made in Tula. So all these proved very effective, and we have some indicators which will help us to reach the zero level of injuries in production. So here you see our contacts, and I'm ready to answer your questions. Thank you very much. I think we will get back to your so our next speaker was supposed to be Oleg Lizhnyu, but unfortunately he wasn't able to arrive in Yakutsk. But Tamara is going to talk briefly about his report. So the topic is how to monitor
So we heard a lot that the Republic Sakha of Yakutia was having problems due to COVID. The Republic was not ready to these things happening, but actually the whole world wasn't ready to that. I would so there is a goal to preserve the length of people working and decrease of mortality rate. I'm sorry, I'm reading it at the first time. So some words are kind of new for me.
So most of the businesses, they don't, the staff don't have enough competence to prevent risks and care about their health. So businesses like this, they need some scientific support, and institutions like Sogas Medicine. So we are not a medical operator, but Sogas Medicine has developed 15 interrelated and very formalized protocols of business processes, and they contain very good guidelines and classificators and detailed protocols on managing health at production. So this model works both for private and public enterprises. So it can collect and process data of health status, and it can help to arrange medical checkups, which can help to eliminate human factor in large groups of workers. And it can help to estimate the efficiency of the funds invested into the staff health. And for regional administrations, this system provides the digital scheme on major parameters of human health of people working in the region. On March 31st, the head of the Republic has signed a resolution on strategic development, directions in improvements of human health, and it is scheduled for the year 2021-2030. So these 10 years have been proclaimed the years of health. So the aims are to foster responsible attitudes to one's health. It's provision of medical care system with qualified personnel, and Mr. Gogolev was talking about that. Development of medical science and development of digital medical care. So I'm not going out to read out the proposals, but I would be grateful for you um, uh, if you look at these main ideas by Oleg Bizhnyov. So he's sending this message from Mirny, and so that's how he participates. Thank you. So we are behind our schedule already, so there is some connections. So we are having Terry Chapin and then Mr. Commissarov. So one of the main directions in the field of the human adaptation, the Arctic, are indigenous people, because they are very connected to the natural environment, and the climate change can alter their traditional lifestyle. And I'm honored to invite Terry Chapin from Fairbanks, from the Institute of Ecology.
Thank you very much.
So, Professor Chapin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. As you all know, Alaska is warming rapidly, just like Yakutia. By the end of this century, the coolest years in Alaska are likely to be warmer than the warmest years that occurred historically.
Sorry.
This has many important effects on indigenous peoples in the North. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
You can hear me. Okay, well, I will continue then. This has many important effects on indigenous peoples in the North. Summer sea ice is declining rapidly and is projected to disappear by mid-century. This changes marine ecosystems and the opportunities and vulnerability of coastal communities. For example, walruses no longer use floating sea ice as their summer feeding platform, so they must go to shore where they're more vulnerable to predators and human hunting. Sea ice no longer protects coastal villages from erosion, so many villages are washing into the sea. Increased marine transport in the North makes development. Let's see. I think the slides are no longer working. Well, I will ignore the slides. Sea ice no longer protects coastal villages from erosion, So some villages are washing into the sea. Yes, I can.
To our audience.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Is it okay for you?
Yes. Next slide, please. Can you hear me?
We hear you. Everything is okay, Terry.
Good. Next slide, please.
Алина, мы вас не слышим.
Well, I will continue without reference to the slides. So large changes are also occurring on land. The land is drying, which changes the ecology of wildlife and the opportunities for rural people to hunt and feed themselves. Wildfires are more extensive and severe, just as in Yakutia. Thawing permafrost causes damage to buildings and roads, and it's no longer possible to store food in ice cellars. The two maps, which I hope you will be able to see at some point, show the distribution of northern ecosystems on the left and of indigenous languages and cultures on the right. This slide, which, if you could see it, this slide would show that these two maps are virtually identical. So this means that if northern ecosystems continue to change, it raises a big question of what will happen to indigenous cultures, languages, and identities of people that are so well adapted to these ecosystems. One of the most serious consequences of climate warming in the North is the potential loss of cultural integrity and livelihoods of indigenous peoples. There are increased vulnerability to storms, the unsafe travel conditions over river ice and sea ice, and potential increases in pollution from northern sea transport. However, I'm very impressed at the capacity of northern peoples to adapt to the changes they experience. From my perspective as a university researcher, the challenge is to find ways to support these communities to implement the solutions that they've already discovered and begun to implement. This begins with respectful engagement of rural communities to learn what they view as the major challenges and opportunities. In these collaborations, we start by contacting many rural communities to find out which ones would like to collaborate with us. We then meet with these communities in community-wide meetings to learn what are to these villages, because there are no roads that travel to these villages. These concerns are widespread among Alaskan villages, so we can look for solutions that have been applied to the entire state of Alaska. The university can also help with the food issue by encouraging wildlife management agencies to prioritize hunting rights of people near their homes and villages. The university can also help with energy issues by finding government support for energy efficient housing and by providing technical solutions to integrating various forms of renewable energies that villages are already experimenting with. For example, the village of Igiagik has been using wind energy, solar panels, and hydropower from the river to provide electricity to their homes, public buildings, and greenhouses. They also use wood from nearby forests to heat their buildings. In addition, each village had a unique concern with which we could help. Relocating the village of Nutok that is threatened by coastal erosion because there's no longer any sea ice to protect the shores during autumn storms. We helped the river village of Kayakuk to find funding to protect its infrastructure from flooding when ice dams form in the spring. We've also helped the village of Igiagik to protect their right to unpolluted water and the right of the village of Nikolai to fish for salmon to meet their food needs. In many cases, I don't have the skills to help villages solve these problems, but at the university, I know other people that do have these skills. So my role in these situations is to put village leaders in contact with people best able to collaborate with them in solving problems. In conclusion, our planet is warming, and Alaska illustrates the complexity of the impacts of this warming. Indigenous people are vulnerable to these changes, but they also have the resilience and cultural strength to respond effectively to many of these changes. In my view, the most constructive role of universities is to support community needs by empowering them to meet their own goals rather than by telling them what to do. Thank you for your attention.
Is that all? So, Professor, is this the end of your presentation?
Yes, that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much for your presentation, for finding time to join us, because I know that it's late at night back there in Fairbanks, and Northeastern Federal University, different departments of the university are also involved in the research similar to your topic. This is the adaptation of indigenous population to the changing Arctic, and I hope that in future we will keep in touch, and we will probably, if you also find it interesting, we could discuss some potential cooperation. So thank you very much for the presentation.
Yes, that would be very interesting. My wife and I have enjoyed collaborating with researchers in Yakutia.
Thank you. And now we are moving to the next presentation. So, and the next speaker is Alexander Komissarov, Deputy Director of the Department of Subsoil Resources Use from UGRA, who is going to talk about the project IT Reindeer Herders Camp. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk at this platform. So the IT Reindeer Herders Camp was launched in 2018, and the aim is to provide indigenous people the access to modern communication technologies. So in our autonomous district okrug of Yugra, there are over 400 communities of indigenous people. So since they are detached and the distance is on average 150 kilometers from major settlements, so there is no access to internet, which means that they don't have access to state services, they don't have access to education, to healthcare, social security, and employment. In the period 2019-2021, the access to internet was provided to about 3,000 people, which means 61% of the indigenous population involved in traditional economy. So we deployed a network of 49 access points in 7 municipal formations, and the project was totally sponsored by oil producing companies. So reindeer camps, they use 2 types of communication. So those who are within the 30-kilometer range, they use this the signal amplifying technology. So they have they speed up to 40 bits per second, and beyond this range, beyond 30 kilometers range, they use more satellite communication. So it gives you the speed of 12 bits a second. So now the indigenous population can use state services online without leaving their place. So you see the number of services provided online has increased from 29 to some 40%. In 2020, the first online school kindergarten was opened on this platform. So now children, they can learn online. So there are 4 online courses. And today we have 18 children from 11 families who remain with their families. And the Herzen State Institute, Pedagogical Institute from St. Petersburg is involved in this project. So another direction is the development of telemedicine. So at the moment, so we have 31 family communities which are covered with this project. We have 23 mobile medical crews, and also we have 6 flying teams. As for social security, now indigenous people, they have access to this system of social support, so they can apply online. And in future, we are going to also make it possible to apply online on granting various social securities. So, for example, like consultations on employment and applications, sending your like resumes online. So in short, this is the information on the IT Reindeer herder scam. So this project is giving new opportunities to indigenous people living in remote areas, and the opportunities are unlimited. And people without leaving their places of residence being able to vote at various elections, to be able to participate, to use various state services. So far, we are not using the potential of this project to its fullest. So it can be, yes, again, medicine, education, and state services. And also it could be used for monitoring the environment, because this territory is being explored intensively by oil producing companies. And so, for example, if some leakages or something occur, maybe these IT stations at Reindeer herders camp could be used also to get the actual picture on spot. So I think that this project is a huge step forward. Thank you. Indeed, it's very difficult to imagine the modern world without the internet, the access to internet, and it's very good that you use this project for telemedicine and for education. So our next speaker is Valentina Lukina. She's the candidate of psychology from the Northeastern Federal University. Valentina, the floor is yours. Good afternoon. I greet all the participants, and I would like to present the results of the comprehensive field research in 2017-2018. So, Edita Egorova, the candidate of psychological sciences, was the main coordinator of this trip. Indeed, today we are witnessing quite negative demographic processes in the Arctic and subarctic regions. We see the depopulation and out-migration of qualified personnel and low living standards, and all these lead to the need for enhancing the attractiveness of these regions. And the Arctic indeed is an extreme zone which sets some higher standards for adaptation. Indeed, we see that the cost of adaptation to this condition is very high. And numerous factors which we see there, they lead not only to physiological manifestations, but also psychological manifestations. And we have higher anxiety level and very higher concern about one's health, irritability, low capability, and a number of other negative responses. In general, when talking about the professional efficiency of people working in the Arctic, this efficiency depends on physiological, psychological, and social adaptation to the conditions in these areas. And despite the fact that a lot of effort is being made to mitigate the negative factors, working in the Arctic remains quite extreme. In a number of researches done previously, we see quite a wide divide among the territories in the manifestation of the northern stress. For example, in the previous research, for example, one of the researchers said that in the first years in the Arctic, people experience some behavioral changes, and they become more neurotic and have higher anxiety. So our field research was done in two districts of Yakutia, Amifon district and Anabar district. So why we chose these districts? So we have two groups, definite groups: indigenous population and newcomers. And also we had qualified personnel like teachers and doctors who came there not to work at mining facilities. So our study covered 208 people. So we have the distribution by gender and by district. And the main aim of our research was to identify social economic factors which lead to good motivation for working in the uptake. The methods of our research, there was a wide range, but I would like to present today only the results of our research by two methods. So we assessed the psychological state by the Kulikov method. So this technique is aimed at identifying the dominant characteristic. So this method includes a number of scales. So, and what our questionnaire showed, one of the parameters of psychological state is the attitude towards life. So you see activity or passivity on the opposite side. So the being active is reflected in the speed of responses and the readiness to overcome problems. And our research showed that our respondents, they tend to the passivity, to passive behavior, and so they have decreased activity rate. Maybe it depends on the weathered resources, maybe. And Kulikov, the author of the technique, told that this parameter is very important for estimating stress. So we can say that these people are in stress. And so we have the general parameter like is tonus. And so we see that this parameter, the values here are also quite low, showing like general fatigue in the population. So it corresponds to the results of other research, other studies in the uptake. And so which also show that people who work under these difficult conditions, they are usually tired. So the next scale is calmness and anxiety. So, and our questionnaire showed that people can feel some unexplainable anxiety, so some general anxiety, leads to the fact that people perceive many events like a threat to their life. So, and their forecasts are generally negative. And so they have some premonition of some looming threat. So it also reflects the general psychological state. The very interesting scale is the last one. It's the positive image of oneself. So, and the values here, they correspond to the results of the previous scales. And we see that here we have the lowest values here. And this value reflects the self-esteem of the respondents, and actually self-esteem is one of the basic characteristics which determines other parameters. And low values here, they speak not only of self-critique, but in general about the negative attitude towards oneself. And the next method is the estimated quality of life. And we used the Duchenko and Bogdanov method, and it is based on subjective evaluation. And this subjective evaluation is also quite demonstrative. So what we see here, if we compare the results of the two districts, Anabar and Nainikhon, we see that there are significant differences in the evaluation of work and professional activity, and also material and living conditions. So people in Nainikhon, they evaluate these parameters lower than people living in Anabar district. So we can say that with the level of dissatisfaction with life, it is quite average, and also the respondents noted that the family life is very important for them, but they have all showed decreased capability, maybe because of the lower resources. So have you studied why people have such low parameters? For example, the positive image of oneself. So our research, our main hypothesis was about migration, about motivation and labor activity. So we didn't study this area in more detail, but it is interesting, promising area of future research. So our next speaker is Valentina Pulyaevskaya. She is deputy head of the Center for Strategic Research, and she is going to talk about the Northern Forum project. So Valentina, are you with us? Good afternoon. Can you see my presentation? We can see you, but we don't see your presentation yet.
Good afternoon, dear participants of the Northern Forum. Can you see my slides? I know we don't see it right now. You can start it from your computer. There is some kind of error.
My experience is that it shows the official delegates, the official I think that we didn't really send delegates to.
You have right to share screen.
And I'm sure that with this committee that we have organized for now, that our
So there is share screen button in the Zoom.
that our participation will increase, and we see it now. And the chairman of the legislative Duma.
Maybe we can do it without the presentation.
Where they discussed the problem
Okay, we will
stimulating
start it
businesses and
from Yakutsk.
those who work in the territory of the territories and
In our country, the problematic of development of the northern territories is very important.
small scale
Last year, there were a lot of decisions to develop this zone.
to actualize the territories.
There are a lot of legal documents.
Despite the Arctic, the
Uh,
Arctic Line is not the part of the Arctic region. We do have.
So the president's legal document
northern territories, and they don't have the federal.
about the strategy of development of the Arctic zone and national security up to 2035.
And to work on the logistics.
Also, we have a state program for development this Arctic zone.
Industrial winds of our cry, it can be really
There are
supported.
different kinds of projects.
So we for sustainable development and the Academy of Science of Russia, the branch of the Academy of Science of Russia, they
After implementing these legal documents, the new institutions of development has been started. Cooperation for development of the Northeast and Arctic, and the Far East Agency for attraction investigations in support of experts.
actual for our cry as well, because we witness the changes in our territories as well.
Nikolaev Igor Ivanovich is head of the group that is an instrument for improvement and development of non-political dialogue between northern people.
And you know that we have wildfires as well, and the factors of forests were burned.
This project is implemented in terms of the working group of Northern Forum, quality of life of population in the Arctic. And the goal is to assess the quality of life and to recognize the main issues and the ways to solve them. And so the main tasks are analysis of social and economic and ethnocultural development of the Arctic zone, and also determining the indicators of assessment. Our center is implementing the project Human in the Arctic from the beginning. We developed indicators in 5 directions: population, health, education, and the culture.
But now let me give the floor to Anna Olke, member of the Federation Council of the Federal Assembly of the Russian
From 2014 to 2017, we had 4 sociological assessments. You can see where these assessments were conducted. Based on the received data. We made a portrait of a human in the Arctic. It's like the average person in the Arctic, woman older than 40, married with 2 children, lives in her town and doesn't plan to move. Salary is has health problems, respiratory.
The most dangerous climate change aspects are connected to natural hazards such as flooding, permafrost melting.
Despite all these facts, the quality of life is estimated as positive.
Ocean water increasing and others.
Also, this person is interested in personal growth and traditional activities and preserving cultural identity.
From fires to floods and taking into consideration that the world
But there is decrease in interest of the youth, in interest in the native languages.
climate change are interdisciplinary way. For example,
Small businesses should be improved.
to adapt economics as well. So the problem of
In
administrative
2015 and 2017, in the territories of Republic of Sakayakuta, there were a lot of business seminars with lectures from Norway
how to provide and how to adjust
on how to
medical
manage
services and
people.
safety events and how to avoid natural hazards. There are 2 main strategies of adjusting economics to the climate change. First is risk-oriented measures that allow mitigate the total number of risks.
So discussing these problems was discussion of these problems was held in the different events of this project Human in the Arctic in different regions. And as a result, there were a lot of suggestions that were
They were defined
2018 and 2019. The project was stopped due to the lack of funding. And from 2020, social assessment was there were assessments conducted in Anabarsky, Momsky Rayon.
2022. The start of the new climatic era of politics.
1,300 people were assessed.
Greenhouse gas emissions, which was
and 500 indigenous people among them.
And it includes
This is about 40%. Based on the results of this assessment, the average portrait has changed. A woman from 31 to 45 married with a higher education and two children under 18.
Companies and organizations connected to big numbers of greenhouse
speaks Russian from childhood, doesn't plan to move.
To the climatic changes and to these new restrictions. And that's who will be able to
The results differ in different regions. For example, people from Murmansk were not satisfied with medical aid provided in their region. Not satisfied with the salaries, and people from Republic of Sahara were not satisfied with education, medical aid, and the quality of food products.
Certain prices from the Russian market. And unlike the European countries,
only the third of the all people call their native language as their main language.
Some sectors of economy are decreasing because the total effect of the negative climate change will have more negative effect.
Every fifth person was estimating themselves like poor.
Programs and to build a plan on how to adjust the economy to these changes. Last year,
This year,
created a report.
the assessments are continuing.
Climate change and under the economic estimate of possible estimated numbers, including
The Alaihovsky, Venebutantayski, and Nizhny Rayon district were assessed.
when conducting such plans, it's more
The results will be formed by the end of this year. To conclude, I would like to say that our center is interested in further development of the project Human in the Arctic and in improvement of the life of indigenous people in the Republic and other regions of Russia. But to implement this project, we need more funding and interregional partnerships, and also partnerships with institutions from other countries.
Suggestions which will be included into the resolution.
That's it. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Valentina Leonidovna. I have just one question. So based on this data, Arctic has a female face.
His committee,
So what is the reason for that?
his committee
We have respondents who were mostly female. So women are more open to participate in such projects. So talking about the adaptation of indigenous people in the Arctic, we have watched and listened to the reports on indigenous people of the Northern America. And now I would like to give the floor to Svein Mathiesen, as professor of Summer University of Applied Sciences.
Здравствуйте, dear colleagues. Could you please put up my slides, my PowerPoint? I'm a professor at Northeastern Federal University in Yakutsk. In addition to be associate professor at some university college in Norway. So my heart is actually at the Northeastern Federal University at the UNESCO Chair Office in Yakutsk. Could you please put my PowerPoint up? Did you receive my PowerPoint?
No, we haven't received your presentation, so could you share it to the...
It was sent to you
screen,
yesterday
please?
by Sveta Avlova. Could you see this? Работало?
Yes, yes, we can see that. Yes, we can see the presentation.
You can see. Okay,
Yes.
a moment. Okay. So I'm going to talk to you about adaptation, and I'm going to talk to you today about a joint work we do with Indigenous people in Sakayakuta. I came to Republic of Sakayakuta more than 30 years ago. That's why I'm very honored to still be a professor at Northeastern Federal University, as you see the logo. The title of my talk today is Challenges and Opportunities for Indigenous People of the North to Adapt to Global Change in the Arctic. So this talk will actually be about adaptation. I'm talking out of a research project I have done together with a lot of different colleagues in Republic of Sakayakuta. And the work is very soon being published in Springer, and it's the two chapter 6 and 7 in our Springer book, Trends and Effects of Climate Change in Reindeer Husbandry and Adaptation to those changes I'm going to report from. And you see there is a different transdisciplinary skilled scientists from the indigenous communities in Sakayakuta. We have anthropologists, meteorologists, climatologists, biologists together. Because adaptation is we are only able to solve the issue on adaptation through multidisciplinarity. The world is complex, and that makes it very difficult to study. Okay, so this is the Republic of Sakayakuta, and our investigation has taken place in a transect from north to the south, all about reindeer husbandry and the indigenous people doing reindeer husbandry in Nizhny Kolomsk, Tomponsky, Aldansky, and Nerungrinsky district. So we have involved Dolgan, Chukchi, Evenki in our work, trying to understand what kind of adaptation is possible to create opportunity for future survival. Okay, so we have used the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change definition on adaptive capacity. Adaptation, what is that? The ability of a system, institution, humans or other organisms to adjust to potential damage, to take advantage of opportunity and respond to the consequences. This is what we are working with in our team at the Northeastern Federal University. Ability of a system to adjust to potential damage. Okay. We have been very fortunate to receive funding by Nordforsk, and we are developing a strategy for co-production of knowledge. That means that we see the indigenous knowledge in Sakayakuta is an important part to understand adaptation. But before we understand what we are going to adapt to, we have to understand what changes. This is air temperature in Sakayakuta in the spring. It's actually March, April, and May. To the right, to the left, it's Chersky. In the middle is Topolini, and to the right, it's actually Chulman and Erungri. And you see here to the left that air temperatures has increased in Chersky with more than 6 degrees, not 1 or 2 degrees, as the global community talks about, with more than 6 degrees already. One consequence is increased precipitation. And this is Elena Antipina, rector in Chersky Arctic College. And you see the precipitation as snow. Warming means open ocean, and in some years means more snow, you know? So that's one challenge, that you will get extreme precipitation as snow in some years. This slide shows the dynamics of domestic reindeer in 4 different regions in Sakayakuta. Those regions we are investigating. Here we have actually from Nizhny Kolomsk to Nerungri. And we see that all populations of reindeer are actually decreasing, you know, and some are decreasing to the extent that we have to do something. We have to look into this and see how we are able to solve the issues number of reindeer in domestic reindeer husbandry. A major problem for the reindeer husbandry and ability to adapt is the loss of reindeer to predators. The small calves born in Sakayakuta is often eaten by bears and wolves, and it's a major problem. Some herds we work with is actually 50% of the calves are eaten by the bears in an early part of May. Future climate is also affecting Sakayakuta. And we have done statistical downscaling of air temperature. And we see here that in southern Sakayakuta, even in Tompo, in Topolini, it won't be very much increase in the temperature in the future. But in the north, Ambarchik, for example, we will see quite high increase in air temperature. Sakayakuta is an important mining region of the Russian Federation, has been for more than 100 years. And in some areas, it could be challenging. In other areas, it could create opportunities for marketing and selling of the products. In addition, we have seen that, for example, this year, this is official pictures by the Republic of Sakayakuta about the forest fires. An area similar to Portugal has been burning. And it comes on the top of all these other changes. But it's possible. And yes, and this here you see the number of detectable fires in the Republic of Sakayakuta from 1998 to 2020. And you see here just for the last years, it increased from 132 to 2061 fires. A lot of these fires are, just give me 2 seconds. Sorry. So a lot of these fires is fires which happening independent on human activities. So you see here on the top of all changes, you see the forest fire, the tundra fires goes from 130 in some few years to 2000. And I'm not coming with the solution to this huge challenge for Sakayakuta. I know how it has been, but it's only through multidisciplinary analysis, using all available results, we are able to work out of this. So adaptation of indigenous people are related to the economic development of their small communities. This is the conclusion of 2 Springer publications made by this multi-authorship. And it's based on the production of traditional products, mainly food, developed on creative industries and different services. At the same time, it will be the base for the economic development and modernization of the indigenous communities in the Arctic. To achieve this goal, regardless of these changes we see, there is a need to develop new economic models for the indigenous reindeer husbandry. And actually, there is some very good examples in Sakayakuta. In northern Sakayakuta, we have some very good examples of using traditional indigenous knowledge in innovation and development. And in the future, we will focus on those to see if we could have added value from those reindeer herders who actually has been succeeding in developing their own economy. And as I said, the culinary food available in Sakayakuta is rich and is mainly because of the high biodiversity in Sakayakuta. And based on this deep and long tradition and indigenous knowledge, it is possible to adapt to main small communities, even though we see these huge changes. But it calls for cooperation. And one important part of cooperation we discussed yesterday at the forum in Yakutsk. We had a seminar on intellectual property rights of indigenous people. And the outcome of that seminar will be reported to the leadership of Arctic Council. And it calls for a new guideline, how to protect indigenous people's knowledge and cultural heritage. And there was a general agreement to work together. And actually in this seminar, we had people from Alaska, we had people from Anadyr, from Moscow, from Norway. It's all available on the YouTube link, because this is the most important. In particular here in Norway, we see that there is a competition for knowledge. There is money in knowledge. And here in Norway, we see that big institutions don't support the indigenous right to protect their own knowledge. That's very important when you're going to develop adaptation strategies, when we see those changes, as I have drawn out on my presentation, related to air temperature, precipitation, mining activities, and of course the forest fires. It's important that we put the indigenous reindeer herders in Sakayakuta in a position to decide about their own destiny. That means training. That means training of indigenous people. It means the importance of NEFO, the other colleges and training arenas in Sakayakuta. It could only take place where people are living. So training to future adaptation means training to respect your own indigenous knowledge and use that further in your business development to develop your own society. That was the conclusion of my talk, a little insight into the story where we are working all these different experts in Sakayakuta Nefu, how we actually are through that work will come up with a plan for the future, which the Republic could use or not use, but we're trying to open up a discussion for future adaptation, which also means opportunity. Thank you everyone for allowing me to participate. I'm very sorry not being present in Yakutsk today because of the COVID situation, but I promise you I will very, very soon be back in Yakutsk and will work with you again. Thank you. Spasibo большое. Maktal.
Thank you very much. We are looking forward to see you here in Yakutsk. And Northeastern Federal University works a lot on history and ethnography. And our next speakers are Natalia Struchkova and Kapitalina Yakovleva, specialists in history from the historical faculty of Northeastern Federal University. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Of course, this is a very valuable opportunity to exchange views on the Arctic studies. And our topic today is, the topic of our research is the presentation of scholarly historical studies done at the historical faculty. And how can we cooperate with our colleagues on various projects? And last year we also participated at the forum, but today we have a more comprehensive report. So we are going to talk about how we do our scholarly research. So any scholarly research depends on financing. And here I have to say that we have the program of development, and thanks to the endowment fund of our university, the historical faculty made this breakthrough in the study of the Arctic. And the Arctic studies are based on the traditional knowledge, basing on the existing historical schools, and historical faculty is one of the oldest faculties because it was founded in 1934. So we have very good schools of ethnography. This is the Professor Gogolev's school. So we have scholarly school of Anatoly Alexeyev. We have the political science school of Professor Petrov. And with this foundation, we do further research. So mostly we are focused on education. We would like to say, to inform the global community that we are preparing a new generation of actors, people who will be working in science and education in the sphere of Arctic studies. And we have licensed new curricula related to the North. So this program is called the Archaeology and Ethnology of Central and Northern Asia. This is a joint program with our colleagues in Kazakhstan. So we have been teaching for many years online course, peoples and cultures of the circumpolar world. this was done along with the Institute of Foreign Languages. We also tried to develop the students' academic activity. So we have a lot of field trips, and we have compiled a unique database of materials over the past 10 years. New materials on ethnography, archaeology, political structure. So I would like to give the floor to Kapitalina Yakovleva. So we start, actually we resumed the field research in 2012. So we studied the ethos of culture of the peoples, and we have the group on cultural anthropology, and it was done under the project Foresight of the Republic Sakayakuta. So first we went to Tata region, Ainekun, Alenyok regions, and the aim of the research of this Foresight research was to identify the level of preservation of traditional culture. And in 2013, we had the peak of our field research, and we had ethnographic field trips and archaeological field trips. For several years, our ethnographic field trip on the transformation of Yakut villages. And the aim of this expedition was not only scholarly but also educational, because the members of these expeditions were basically students and postgraduates, undergraduate and postgraduate students. So another project was on studying the adaptation of peoples in the Middle Neolith to these new landscapes in central Yakutia. And in 2013 we also went to Kazakhstan, and we conducted ethnographical and archaeological field trips. And in 2014 we continued our archaeological and ethnographic field trips. But starting from 2014, we went beyond the Republic. We had a very interesting field trip to Yesey village in Krasnoyarsk region. And we worked with ethnic Yakuts, Saha people, but who live in Krasnoyarsk Krai. So in the period 2014-2019, we have worked with the British researchers. I would like to add that we were honored, the staff, the faculty and the students of historical faculty, to be a part of this joint project of NEFU and the Cambridge University. So the project was coordinated by the director, by the dean of the historical faculty. So basically it is focused on the historical aspect. So, but the project was on choosing the new survival strategy during globalization. So it was a comprehensive multidisciplinary project on identifying the historical experience of how indigenous people adapted their culture to extreme environment, to changes in the social environment, like globalization. So we studied just transformation of traditional cultures, and very often we hear that our colleagues saying that we are fighting for the traditional culture, but we have the question why we cannot be IT specialists, why we are so like tied to the like traditional occupations. Yes, of course, indigenous people had to be involved in these traditional economies because they were the only possible ones in that time. But now, I think that our scholarly research must be aimed at finding new opportunities. So we need to do this research and to present it to the world community. So the urbanization processes are very of interest here. So at first the question was, can we talk about the urbanization of the north in general? Because in Yakutia we have only like some 5-6 cities, and urbanization is a very complex process, and but they are starting slowly, and we must be ready for these changes, and even psychologically and in terms of culture. So this project was of interest in terms of studying nomadic culture of the indigenous peoples of Yakutia, like events, evenki, yukagirs. So we had very interesting results, and I think the international academic community, after this long period of research, so we are grateful to the endowment funds of the university, because our studies were based on field research, and you need a lot of money, especially here in the Arctic. So now we have updated material database which could be used for further research, and this fundamental research must be linked to the industrial exploration as well. So as our colleagues told us about that today. So and definitely we must have this joint interest. So we are training our young specialists, and our students get their PhD degrees, and one of our students is now in Canada working on his PhD. So I hope that we will get new anthropologists, and we'll have new anthropological studies. So this field research resulted in a huge database, and our students, postgraduate students, were able to get these international grants, for example, UA Johansson grants. And so in 2018-19, we won the grants from the Russian president and from the Russian Fund for Fundamental Research. So today we can say that so the material gathered also helps the academic historical group. So they joined together during this project, and now they graduated and they work at various institutions, and they started their activities during their studies at the university, but now they are independent researchers. So there have been various awards and victories at various conferences and contests, and in future we believe that we'll continue that, and so we stopped last year. Yes, we participated online, but this is not very good. But starting from this year and next year, I hope that we are going to continue our research, and we'll resume our field research with wider geography. And in conclusion, I would like to say that we have short time, but hopefully you've seen that the names of our projects, and maybe if you are interested in our data, and we have the copyright for the data, our database, and we would like to be part of the project which will change the life in the Arctic. Thank you for your attention, and wish you fruitful work. Thank you, Natalia, Kapitalina, for sharing your success stories. On the role of women in the Arctic, Galina Vasilyeva is going to talk about it. She is the candidate of biological sciences and associate professor of the Northeastern Federal University.
After the 2020, we didn't have really quite a lot of ideas.
Hello, dear participants of this discussion that covers a lot of vital issues or about the life of indigenous people. In Starostin Vladimir Petrovich passed away last month. We had a lot of plans. Fortunately, I don't know what will happen next. So all these years were important for in 2020, it was 25 years for declaration
Моисея Альбина Никитьевна, я и вот еще 2 человека. Конечно, это было даже по тем временам очень грандиозное международное событие. И, кстати сказать,
It was a big international event.
Всемирного для женщин.
And in the resolution of the United Nations was there were framework about climate change and about equal rights for women of the whole world.
So the permanent forum
существования человеческого сообщества. Так что вопросы, которые мы пытаемся здесь поднять, являются очень важным для рассмотрения в этот знаменательный день. Ну и, кстати сказать, вся вот нить, так скажем, основа сегодняшних выступлений все так или иначе касалась именно вопросов женщин, да? Хотя, может быть, в открытую не говорили, но тем не менее. Отношение к роли и месту женщины в обществе современного человека складывалось веками. Современный человек свободно от каких-либо религиозных, там, мифологических рамок может выражать свое отношение к данной проблеме открыто, непредвзято, вне зависимости от пола. А женщина, по крайней мере, в демократических странах пользуется всеми возможностями и правами и может сама пробивать себе дорогу, как мы знаем. Ну, надеемся, что так и в дальнейшем будет. Но это было не всегда так, как вам известно. В глубокой древности, в человеческой архаике сохранилось иное представление о женском начале, о женском пути, о женской доле, совершенно не соответствующее современным представлениям. Думается, необходимо его рассмотреть не только с точки зрения научного интереса, но и в свете современных гендерных баталий. Изменения, которые происходят сегодня,
First of all, the change that happens has its historical background. The problems of gender differences has roots in the history, and doing research in this field helps the improvement of this issue. Social organization of life of the people of the Arctic is determined by ecological situation in the regions and the climate change. They are always connected with changes in the culture, and nowadays social conditions are controversial.
This expert point of view has also included national policy on.
There is opinion that the indigenous people are not adapted to the market. They can't adapt to the post-industrial conditions.
Conducted by my colleague Amado Ibrahim.
The reason for that is that there are problems with logistics, low level of modernization, the lack of technologies, and other social problems. High unemployment, alcoholism, and the saddest thing is that the percentage of alcoholization is increasing among the women, especially in the areas of indigenous peoples. So the agricultural territories disappear and
involved into other economic aspects such as cultural heritage, tourism development,
and the polluting of ecology occurs. Violation of ecological balance leads to increase in the health problems. There are new pathologies among indigenous people. I think that this problem in of COVID
because it is very important that they provide them with the proper information.
is
especially on the
it
plans
has
for
even
naturally
faster and bigger problem in this due to lack of aid and illness.
and industrial organization. I'd like to
So these regions are the least protected from the COVID.
that was
Indigenous peoples became hostages of the benefits that are and when they talk only about money, it's difficult to say about
discussions connected to waste disposal, processing, plastic disposal, and with degradation of the landscape and ecosystem. So such measures
ecological problems are connected with this need to protect environment from anthropogenic impact, especially new strategies businesses.
this research because in the previous recommendations, I link to hearing the voices ultimate representatives of indigenous people are their communities. The deadline to apply for this is January that is how it's the communities, the biodiversity, the environment. So I encourage you
можно сохранить жизнь людям, да, родить детей, их как-то вот вырастить, воспитать, накормить как-то вот, да, создать быт какой-то. Это же огромная сила, и мне кажется, если бы женщины не могли этого делать, то, наверное, на севере люди бы никогда не жили. Поэтому в этом плане огромная роль принадлежит женщинам. И если бы не вот женская хватка в этом плане, то, конечно, было бы очень сложно, во-первых. Во-вторых, конечно, сейчас необходимо...
It would be very difficult without the women, and we need to think about the opportunities and how the women in the Arctic to survive in such severe situation. So this traditional lifestyle should be preserved somehow. For example, in Finland, there are these beautiful houses that can be constructed very easily, and nomads can travel anywhere with these houses. Maybe we should provide our people with such houses. So more deep research in this field has a lot of historical roots that needs its interpretation. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Galina Safronovna. We hope that the voice of the women in the Arctic will be heard, considering the very important role of women in the Arctic. And our session will be finished soon, and I will give the floor to the senior researcher of Permafrost Institute, Людмила Лебедева.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. It's an honor to me to present our research to such a multidisciplinary community. It's our study on it's a joint Russian, Swedish, and Japanese project. So most of the settlements in Yakutia settle along on the banks of major rivers, and flooding occurs every year. So this is the simplest forecast is there will be flood next year because it happens every year. So who is affected by floods? So here you see in black dots all the settlements, and red ones those which are at risk of flooding. So on the Lena River, 64% of settlements get flooded one year or another. So like thousands of people, lots of agricultural lands, and most of these settlements, they are located in mostly densely populated central part of Yakutia. So Lena and its tributaries like Lena and Amga. So the average economic damage is about 1 billion rubles a year. And with this major flood in Lensk, the damage was 7 billion rubles. So who is responsible for that? So we have various authorities, for example, Lena Basin Water Management, this is the Rosgidromet, this is Weather Forecasting Service, and this Ministry for Emergency Situations. And as the academic community, when we communicate on various platforms, for example, like this, with authorities and from municipalities which suffer from flooding. For example, yesterday during the panel discussion, one of the representatives of facilities said that the problem is the lack of the methodology of forecasting floods. And our project is aimed at this. So when flooding occurs, so in Yakutia, on major rivers, flooding occurs in springtime when a lot of snow melts and huge volumes of water enter rivers. So you see that last year we had flooding in some of the suburbs of Yakutsk were flooded. So how our floods are different and why they are so difficult to forecast. So in contrast to other rivers like Amur or Kuban, our floods are caused basically by jams, ice jams. So this ice gets packed and creating this natural dam. and water cannot go through. So we actually know these dangerous areas at the turns of the river, at narrow places, but you cannot really say whether the flooding is going to happen or not. Because one year it can pass through and the other year it will be camped there. Also, besides causing a risk of flooding, rivers here is the most important transport artery. So we don't have the bridge across the river, so which means that we are connected to the mainland by a river. So the climate is changing everywhere, and this change is more intensive in Russia and in Yakutia, in the Arctic. It is even the temperature is growing even faster. So of course it influences the hydrological regime and freezing and melting of ice. So the ice is becoming thinner. So we have this quite long-term result of observations at the Tabaga station near Yakutsk. And so the ice thickness in March and April decreased by 2749 centimeters, and of course it affects the operation of ice roads. That also the ice freezing and ice melting is changing. So actually the freezing of the river is quite stable over the past like 10 years. But the breaking of ice is now from 2 to 8 days earlier, so which also affects the operation of ice roads and the preparedness for flooding. So when we talk about the water balance in the rivers, the maximum volume, so well, we cannot see definite trends on the diagram, but we see that at major rivers the water volume is not growing, but for example, if we look at the longer periods, like 75 years, we see the statistically significant trends of increasing, so which signals of the climate change and growing risks of flooding. As our project is multidisciplinary, we cooperate with the Institute of Humanitarian Research, Humanities, and they question people, the locals, what they think about flooding, and here are the results of surveys of the population of Archaeology. So people, the settlement just before the Tabaga Cape, where jams occur, and 80% of the respondents answered that there are more floods recently, and also about 70% of the respondents answered that the freezing occurs later in autumn and ice breaks early. So without knowing the results of the scientific research and monitoring, they see these changes. So our main aim was developing a forecast model, short-term forecast model. So this system is being worked out along with our Swedish colleagues based on the Swedish hydrological model. So the main input data is the weather forecast, and then there is hydrological model, and also they use some actual data on the ice characteristics and water levels. So we developed some test forecasts last year. So this system is available on our site. This is a real-time forecast. You see the link. So it's interactive. You can upscale, and you have all the water monitoring stations, and so you can. So they are located in settlements. So this is valuable information for local people. So you'll see the graph for the water volume and the water level. So the forecast is for 10 days. So in continuous line you have the actual volume, but in dots you see the forecast. So that you can also forecast the ice thickness and also the dates of ice formation and ice breaking. And now we are estimating the accuracy of our forecasts and working on increasing its accuracy. So we cooperate with related organizations, and the dates of ice breaking proved to be now the accuracy is about 4-5 days over the Republic. So the main conclusions are that the hydrological regime of the rivers is changing, and it's going to change. The ice becoming thinner. So the period of icing is decreasing, and the maximum water volumes are either stable or increasing. And at the moment we are developing the forecast and the average default of the forecast is for 90 stations is 4.7 days. So thank you for your attention. Thank you. So as I understand, any person can use this link to see the forecast for their settlements. Yes. For example, but if you want some characteristics which are not on the site or the format is not suitable for you, you can address us. Yes, given the fact that 90% of our population live along the Lena River, it's very relevant. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. We have only 10 minutes left, and now we have the open mic, and if anybody is willing to talk, or maybe some online speakers, we have just some minutes to talk. Well, maybe we need some time to digest the information we have received today, and I would like all the speakers to come up with proposals to the final resolution, and with the permission of the speakers, we will send all the presentations to the participants. I would like to thank the organizers of the committee. I would like to thank the technical support and interpreters, all those who helped us to organize our section today. So thank you everyone, and I'm wishing you most productive week. Thank you for very successful moderating. It was very interesting, not only for environmentalists,